Hey friends, my name's Georgie. Welcome to the Just Breathe podcast, where I'll be talking all things breathing to help empower you guys to use the power of your breath to harness your bodies and minds. Now, today's conversation is a really special one. Not only does this mark the 10th episode of the Just Breathe podcast, today's guest is the author of the book that inspired my personal journey with breath. Patrick McKeown is the international best-selling author of The Oxygen Advantage and creator of the Oxygen Advantage technique. Patrick is widely regarded as one of the world's leading breathing re-education experts, and we got onto topics like Patrick's new book, which zooms in on female breathing and how your hormones can affect your breathing patterns. We got on to the benefits of mouth taping, as well as the vital importance of nasal breathing. Patrick's wealth of knowledge around the science behind breathing is absolutely incredible, and I hope you gain as much insight as I did from the conversation. If you haven't already, don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Let's keep on building that strong breathing community. The more people talking about breathing and using something as simple as the breath to optimize their health, the better. All right, I'm so excited for you to listen in on this one. Here is episode 10 of Just Breathe with Patrick McKeown. Hi, Patrick. Thank you so much for coming on the Just Breathe podcast. It's such a pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much.
Great. No, thanks very much, Georgie. I think we'll have plenty to talk about. So it's thank you too.
100%. Firstly, I think I want to say personally thank you from you, because thank you to you, because the Oxygen Advantage has quite literally changed my life in many ways. I used to be a chronic mouth breather. I used to wake up with a dry mouth and not know why, and have a less energy, even has sort of dizzy spells, and just making those small changes has really elevated my life for the better, and small things as well, like my skin's never been so good. I haven't really, touch wood, experienced any health problems at all, and I used to get sick all the time. So I have to firstly say a huge thank you to you, because if I hadn't picked up the Oxygen Advantage, I think I'd still be in that place now. So.
Sure, of course. Yeah. I think nasal and mouth breathing, and probably some of your listeners are going to say, well, what Georgie has just said is a little bit not far-fetched, but maybe, but for 20 years, I've seen the differences when people switch from chronic mouth breathing to nasal breathing.
Yeah.
And it's really just the mouth in terms of the human being is not made for breathing.
Yeah.
It serves no purpose whatsoever. And I think it puts us in a constant state of fight or flight.
I agree.
And it's as a result of that conditions are different. It can contribute to ill health in some ways and in different ways.
Yeah, agreed. And I think the biggest thing with me was that in some ways I wasn't experiencing life. I was missing a lot because I was in such a flitty state. People used to call me Jiminy Cricket, because I was just all the time all over the place, and I just thought that's just the way I was. Whereas actually it was my breathing throwing me into, like you say, a state of fight or flight. And it had some massive effects. I don't think I was ever fully focused on one task I was doing. And so the richness of my experience was devalued in a way.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt. Going through school, and I was in the same boat. There was a study in Stratford-upon-Avon in 2010, Karen Bonnock's study. She looked at 11,000 British children.
Wow.
Children with sleep disorder breathing if untreated by age 5. And mouth breathing is a contributory factor there. They had a 40% increased risk of special education needs by age 8. So, this is out there, Georgie, but it's been written about in peer-reviewed journals, and it's not getting into the hands of the people who need it the most.
The teachers, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, teachers, without a question of a doubt.
Right.
when we go to school, we are supposed to be able to concentrate. Our ability to get grades is based on our ability to focus and concentrate.
Yeah.
And if we have a child, if there's a child in school, and if that child's mind is racing a little bit, their concentration is impacted.
Yeah.
And as a result, they do less well academically. But then society labels that child as being lesser intelligent.
Right.
It's not based on their intelligence. It's actually based on their ability to focus. And to improve that, we need breathing and sleep.
Yeah,
And
I was
quality
just a good
breathing
night's
and
sleep. I was just going to say, if that child is not sleeping, is snoring,
Yes.
obstructive sleep apnea, then the
Yes.
performance in school is just, it's doomed, right?
Yeah, to the point that I've seen it in one, because Brazil has been putting out more stuff on this than any other country. And I'm not sure really why, but there's been a drive with a therapy called myofunctional therapy. And, Dr. Irani Marches, and she started this whole quest 25 years ago. And she teaches a lot of speech and language pathologists. So the research is there. Children with mouth breathing and sleep disorder breathing have 10 times the risk of learning difficulties, 10 times the risk. So it's not just a fraction, this is, and of course, it's not just related to mouth breathing kids. Think about, like, I'll talk to an adult and they'll say to me, well, I never breathe through my mouth. But then if you ask them, well, do you wake up with a dry mouth in the morning? That's what you said in your introduction.
Yeah.
If we are sleeping with our mouth open, there is a period of 6 to 8 hours where we have chronic mouth breathing.
Yeah.
And it's not that we switch to mouth breathing 100% of the time, but we're going from nose to mouth and nose to mouth, or maybe breathing through both. And it does lead to a lighter sleep, snoring, obstructive sleep apnea, insomnia, because when we're breathing through the mouth, we typically breathe faster and harder, and we're more likely to arouse from sleep.
Yeah, and of course it can disrupt the growth of the jaw as well, as you talk about, and I know James Nestor talks about a lot as well. And I'm 25 now and have full train track braces, which is fine because I'm going through that process now. But perhaps if I nasal breathed from the beginning, it maybe wouldn't have been necessary, which is wild, for actually how many children now may not need that intervention as adults.
Yes. Well, you look at Dr. John Mew in the United Kingdom, he's been talking about this for 50 years. And what happened as a result? Orthodontists went against him. Right. The British Dental Council went against him. And in actual fact, he got more ridicule than praise.
Why is that?
I don't know, but I think it's just human nature. I think human nature, we can be very entrenched in our own views.
Traditions, right?
If you're an orthodontist and you're after spending a lot of money to get trained, and you're being told that this is the way to do it, and then, we have another orthodontist that's saying, well, I think actually we need to be viewing this from a different perspective. And when it comes down to it, Georgie, we have to think about what was John Mew saying. He was saying, breathe through your nose with your tongue resting in the roof of the mouth, because when you have your mouth open, you're more likely to have a narrow jaw and overcrowding of teeth. Yeah. So he said, and John Mew focused more on the airway. He said, it's not necessarily like a good looking face will create teeth, but a good looking face will create straight teeth. Yeah. But straight teeth don't necessarily create a good looking face. We also have to consider the jaw structure. Now, you're fortunate because your jaws seem to be forward, at least from this angle. Yeah. My jaws are set back. Right. Many children's, their jaws are set back. And of course, it is an influence of genetics and breathing patterns, lack of breastfeeding, tongue tie, using a pacifier or a dummy, bottle feeding, eating soft foods. All of these are contributory factors to the development of the muscles of the face. And, mouth breathing is certainly up there with that. And when we look at mouth breathing children, we typically see a longer facial structure, a narrower face, a crooked nose, maxilla set back, lower jaw set back. So when we see somebody without a chin, mouth breathing can be a contributory factor there. John Mew said that, and all he drew was ridicule, even to the point that a New York Times journalist wrote about this about 2 months ago. And the New York Times journalist, if you Google John Mew and New York Times, and he interviewed another orthodontist, a prominent orthodontist in the United States, and the prominent orthodontist ridiculed him as well. But yet I've been at congresses of 1,000 healthcare professionals,
Yeah.
all pretty much saying that what John Mew was saying was right. But this is not the first time in history that somebody has come up and said something different.
Right.
And normally what happens is that the vast majority of said population will ridicule, and as Max Planck said, until they die out, and a new generation grows up with this idea as if it was there all along.
Yeah.
Human behavior, we are very, very resistant to change.
Yeah, I mean, even if you think about veganism about 10 to 20 years ago was ridiculed, right? There were so many vegans jokes going around, whereas right now there's a huge percent of the younger generation that are vegan for economical reasons, for health reasons, just because people have actually started to listen and to try it from themselves. Try it for themselves, sorry. And I think the same maybe goes with breathing, is that perhaps when people put their egos to one side for a moment and actually put into action something so simple as breathing through your nose and, you know, taping your mouth at night, which sounds bizarre at first. I thought it was bizarre at first, but it's so simple and can have just astronomical results in terms of elevation of health and elevation of focus and energy for a child. And it's worth giving them that chance.
Just before I just showed the tape, because sometimes when it comes up in terms of children, of course parents are going to be concerned. But the tape that we talk about, especially for children, is my own tape, and I'm just going to do a demonstration on it, Georgie. It's just the tape is. It's a support aid to help children nasal breathe, and it's cotton and it's kinesio tape based. The glue has been altered. It's hypoallergenic. This is obviously the adult size. Stretch it.
Pop it on.
And what it does is there's an elastic tension bringing the lips together, and the tension is going from left to right, but it's also stimulating the muscle surrounding the mouth, the orbicularis muscle. So it's helping to activate it. And we use this as a training tool, especially for children aged, say, 4 upwards. You know, because during wakefulness, while they're watching television, or if they're distracted, or if they're doing homework, it's very important that when children are distracted that they breathe through the nose with the tongue resting in the roof of the mouth. But yet, between 25 to 50% of studied children persistently mouth breathe. And I don't think any child is going to thrive unless they have nasal breathing habit.
100%. And, you know, even taking the science out of it, you can see, right? I did an interview with a dentist, and he was saying, when I see children with their mouths hanging open, their head falls forward, they look disengaged with the world, and they look almost like unhappy children, very unstimulated children. When they close the mouth, the head comes back, the posture comes up, they can actually see and experience the world again. You said there's nothing more pleasurable for him to see as a dentist than these children. They look brighter, they look engaged, they're more curious, as children should be.
Well,
by closing their mouths.
It's wonderful to hear that, and I think that the future of dentistry is more than just looking into and fixing teeth. It is really, they have got a tremendous role to play in terms of gatekeepers to the airway. They can identify risk factors in children. And as you said, forward head posture can be a compensatory mechanism, or a compensatory aspect in terms of children who are mouth breathing. I lived stuck in my head for 20 years, completely absorbed in thought. And when you are living in your head, you miss out on life because you're not connecting with life. You're not relating to life through your senses. You know, if we have all of our attention absorbed in thought, we are absolutely asleep. And spiritually, throughout the centuries, always those words were tended to be used, asleep or awake. You know, and really what we're talking about here is awareness. And what is it? You know, because these terms are always bandied around, and mindfulness as well. And like, essentially all it means is that, number one, is that we are paying attention to what we are thinking about, that we are aware of our thought processes. And when we are on that cycle of often repetitive and unproductive and, you know, kind of incessant thinking, that we're aware of our thoughts, and we're aware of the effect it's having on our emotions and how that's feeding back into our thoughts. And when we are aware of it, we can make a conscious decision to step out of thought. Not the easiest thing to do, granted, but at least the mechanism, to be aware of it is a tremendous step forward, because for 20 years I was living absolutely encapsulated in thought, lost in thought.
Yeah.
You school, I wouldn't even, if I picked up a book, and as I said this in many podcasts, I'd be looking at the page, but my attention wasn't on the page because I was so caught in my head.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
on the breath was a great gateway. It was a great opener to taking my attention out of the mind onto our breathing. And, mindfulness, it's a confusing term. It really would be called stillness of the mind, or presence, or space
awareness
between thoughts, awareness, because and psychologists have estimated we have between 70 and 90,000 thoughts a day, and 95% of them are repetitive and useless. Like, we are trained how to think, but we are not trained how to bring some space between our thinking. And overthinking, it doesn't generate happiness. It's contributing to anxiety, to high stress, and to unhappiness.
And 100% with people my age as well, the younger generation, with things like social media. As brilliant as it is for spreading awareness, it has such brilliant qualities, but everything is instant now. You can get food instantly delivered to your home. You can pay in an instant, all the time. Ding, 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 ding. And I say to people I teach when I'm working with breathwork, that if your phone is on and it's in your room, the rest of the world is still in your room and you haven't switched off. And breathing allows you, like you said, to create that space. And which is why I am so passionate and about spreading this work. I think it's so important, especially to almost, I'd go as far as to save the young generation. To give them space.
Yes, I would agree with you. My internet's just a little bit unstable, so there was a pause there, but hopefully it's fine.
Yeah.
I think it's very sinister. They are multinational corporations, and this is going to be broadcast on their platform, and that's fine. You have a large multinational corporation who brings in expert minds in psychology, and their one goal was, how can we make people addicted to our platform?
Yeah.
There was nothing about advancement in human potential. It's not about advancement in human potential.
No.
It's about these multinational companies. It's about them trapping the younger generation, and holding them to the platform, because the longer that they can have the person on their platform, the more money it generates and the more profit they make. They are
fueling addiction. Almost.
It is addictive. It is, and there's no question, the like buttons, all of this stuff, on Instagram, if you send a message and if you don't reply, the message is, it's deleted and it's all time. It's so clever. I really find it's terrible. I absolutely, my own child of a 10-year-old, and young girls, their suicide rates have increased dramatically since 2009. And people could say, well, it's, how can you show that there's a causal relationship there? I think the science has shown it.
I agree.
Because if I look at Instagram, I'm nearly 50, so I don't care in terms of looks all that much. Genuinely, it's, when you're in your 20s, it's always when you're in your teens, you're a little bit more insecure, of course, naturally. But even the 20s can be insecure as well, And for people who are attractive, they're fine, and life can be a little bit easier. And people who are normal-looking individuals, they're looking onto Instagram, and they're seeing beautiful bodies and beautiful faces, and they're comparing themselves. And then there's a comparison. Oh, I'm inferior because I don't look the same as that person here. But we have to bear in mind that people who are posting most about their own faces and bodies on Instagram are ones that have good bodies and faces.
100%. And I have had a fair bit of experience in the modeling industry as well, and know from experience that the majority of those beautiful photos are actually not a clear representation of the beautiful people posting them. Yes, they may be attractive individuals, but those photos are highly edited. Often there are apps now where, you can even make yourself smaller. You can completely airbrush your skin, and it's creating unattainable goals for young girls. I'm the same. I have a little sister in her teens, and it is terrifying to think that now that is put out there as the standard, and there is no standard. It's unattainable, and it is not even a healthy standard, because if you are 5 foot and a little bit more of a pear shape, you're not going to look like the 6'1" girl who is a natural hourglass and has small bones. But why are we being constantly fed these images that is acceptance? That's how.
Well, there's a theory on that, and I have to be careful in terms of PC, but most fashion designers are male.
Yeah.
And most of them are gay.
Right.
And you have to think that their preference, what is their preference, you know? Like most men, as any man, a red-blooded man, we all love curves. In a female, we love curves. We're not looking for this waif thin.
Yeah.
So it's not a preference, it's a preference of a select group of individuals. So it is a preference of fashion designers, and you know, they're approaching it from their perspective. But yet that has been created as the norm. Yeah. And I don't know how to police this, and I don't know how to, as a parent, you know, like I don't want to be badgering up my own child all the time, and I'm sure many parents don't, but this is where the education system could step in, and this is where they are likely failing. You know, cut out 1 or 2 subjects, cut out geography, for example, or half geography, half the time spent on learning geography. It's an important subject, fine. And spend the other half about how to deal, how to protect yourself, and exploring and getting, so children know and teenagers know that what they are seeing is not a perception of reality. It's not the truth. It's a very distorted perspective. Yeah. And, you know, I think this is really, really important because, you know, opinions and all of the layers of conditioning that we've experienced throughout our lives, we are hypnotized. We are all programmed. Yeah, you've been brought up in the United Kingdom, I'm assuming. I've been brought up here in Ireland. I will be hypnotized differently than you will be. If somebody is brought up in a Muslim religion, they will be hypnotized differently than I am. And we all believe our own program to be correct. We all believe that our own opinions are correct, but yet our opinions are all so different based on how well we have been hypnotized. Yeah. And we have been brainwashed. And, you know, this is the reality. And people, you know, it's not that it's just the reality. There are layers of conditioning there. So it comes back to this. How can we take the opinions of others as absolute fact, because everybody is approaching and making their opinion based on their conditioning. And their conditioning is so different depending on their religion, depending on their education, depending on their peers, their family, what they view on television, etc. So the truth, what is the truth?
Yeah, but I think that links back round now to breathing, to if you look into Dan Brûlé's work, into Philip Shepherd, works a lot with embodiment work, or all those different very well-known practitioners in the world of breathing, that, you know, their whole practice is in creating space, like we were saying before, coming back to self, understanding, becoming aware of your own inner being. Because if you have more awareness of your own mind, of your own perhaps destructive thought patterns that social media creates, by breathing and coming back to breath and having a better knowledge, right? You come back to yourself in that space. So I'd go as far to suggest, why not switch that half a geography class with a 30-minute breathing session for children?
Absolutely.
You know?
Absolutely. And I've seen it in my own life, and we're all going to have ups and downs. We're all going to experience, you know, we're going to experience death. You know, we're going to experience what life does. And I have to say, when we have some constant, and one constant in our life is the breath. Yeah. And life is very much softer. But not only is life softer, when something does go wrong, it doesn't seem to take us captive as much. Yeah. You know, we have that break there, that we have some attention in the body, some attention on the breath, that we are not just living in our head. And if you think about it, imagine there's 2 people, and one person is very, you know, racing mind, and the other person has a calm mind. And if I present a difficult situation to both people, the person with the racing mind is probably going to go off the charts.
Meltdown.
And the person with the calm mind, they're in a situation that their mind is calm during their normal everyday, that when something happens, they can approach it from a clear perspective. I was the one with the racing mind.
Yeah.
We can train the mind. We can train the brain. We can train the brain, and the breath, as you said, is the one thing that's really, really crucial here.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm not the first person to say that if the breath was more prominent in people in sort of leading positions, teachers, parents, etc.,
Yes.
and the vital importance really acknowledged and communicated, I genuinely think the world would be so much more connected.
Yes.
Not by
Yes.
phones,
And
actually.
less violence.
And less
And
violence.
less misery. And
Yeah.
less suffering.
Yeah.
Less depression.
Mm-hmm.
Because even if we were to look at, I suppose it's not just about focusing on the breath, but even looking at the dimensions of breathing.
Yeah.
I was a chronic mouth breather. You were mouth breathing. I'd always got cold hands. Always
me
had
too.
cold hands in my early teens and 20s. I had brain fog. When I started slowing down my breathing and reducing the volume of air that I was breathing, it was the first time, and within minutes, we can generally get people to experience it. Their hands get warmer. We
Yeah.
can increase blood flow and oxygen delivery to the brain. We can calm the central nervous system. So when the mind is agitated, we can bring a calmness to that. And that's breathing from a biochemical point of view. And then if we start practicing breathing through the nose with the tongue and the roof of the mouth, breathing low with lateral expansion and contraction of the lower ribs, that also has a calming effect on the brain because the diaphragm is linked with the emotions. And if we go one step further to resonance frequency breathing or cadence breathing to between 4.5 and 6.5 breaths per minute, it stimulates the vagus nerve. It increases what's called heart rate variability, which is a clinical measure of stress. And it is known that individuals with depression and individuals with trauma, post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, they have reduced heart rate variability. But we can improve that by changing breathing patterns. So we can influence the functions of the body that's normally outside of our control through the breath. But I think there has been misinformation has crept in about the usefulness of big breathing, the usefulness of taking these fuller and bigger breaths, and the more air you breathe.
Take a deep breath, right? Before you go into your
breath.
exam, take a deep breath, and everyone goes.
Yes, I did it.
Yeah.
And I didn't just take a deep breath for one breath, which mightn't have been too bad. I took deep breathing. I went for a walk before going into one of my finals, third year or fourth year it was. And I went for a walk for about 5 minutes, hyperventilating for the 5 minutes. And I walked into the exam hall. I was absolutely out of my head.
Yeah.
I was totally lightheaded. And, this is based on the idea that I thought it was useful to, I was already a chronic overbreather anyway.
Yeah.
If you're already a chronic overbreather, if you're already stuck in sympathetic activation, it doesn't make sense to start. I should have been doing the opposite. I should have been sitting down, taking my attention inwards and really slowing down my breath to the point of nothing.
Yeah.
And that would help to bring me into a state of calm. And after that, then, if I'm too relaxed and I need to be more alert going into the exam, do a few breath holds, but, to increase blood flow to the brain, to increase CO2 or carbon dioxide. This is the thing about breathing. We can alter our states and we can down regulate or we can up regulate. We can achieve a better balance because the human body is always striving for balance. There's a tremendous intelligence going on in the human body.
Yeah.
And a balance that we don't want to be switched on all the time, but we don't want to be switched off all the time. We want to be in that balance that we can adapt to whatever situation arises.
Exactly.
And that's called resilience.
Exactly.
And, for some people, they have pretty good resilience, but others don't. And, that's where the breath can come in.
Yeah. And I truly go as far to say that since starting the work of the Oxygen Advantage, reading the Oxygen Advantage, going on to research more, to become an Oxygen Advantage instructor, I would 100% call breathing my superpower because how empowering to know that if you are stressed out, if you need more focus, if you need to calm down, any sort of imbalance in your system, you actually have the power within yourself with something as simple as breathing to alter your state, like you said, to alter your state, to alter your mind. And I think that's the most empowering thing out there. You don't need to pay for anything. You don't need to use any sort of device. You can simply rely on your own body, and
Yes.
it's right there, and
Yeah.
anyone can do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. Totally.
I
And
think it's incredible.
maybe that's the reason that it hasn't become popular. You don't need to pay for it.
Yeah, it's too
And
accessible. It's too simple.
it's too simple and it's too
think.
accessible. But again, there is a reason that mankind has been looking towards the breath, especially in the Eastern traditions,
Yeah,
for 2,500 years.
yeah,
They got it. They got it. And reading a book by Robin Rottenberg, Restoring Prana, and she wrote it from a yoga perspective, and she asked a question: what was the ancient wisdom in terms of breathing? And the ancient wisdom was all about breathing subtle, was the word. That wonderful thing. But in Western society, we need it to be visual, we need it to be hyperactive, we need it to be like, you turn on some of the videos on YouTube and you're listening to constant non-stop talking in a high-pitched tone, and everybody's excited, and so but these are some of the videos that I'd have to listen to when I'm here in the house. And it's really society. So Western society, if it's not there out there in your face, it's no good.
right.
And if you're doing a reduced breathing exercise, you can't visually see anything. The guy isn't doing anything extraordinary. It doesn't look as anything. And as a result, we don't give it any credence.
Yeah.
But what's happening internally? What is the impact that is happening in terms of, the biochemistry, the blood circulation, oxygen delivery? It's profound.
Yeah. And it's that less is more approach, I suppose, actually,
Yes.
that blows every single maybe aesthetic or visually pleasing thing you're seeing in those crazy videos that we see online.
Yes.
It's blowing those out of the water, because to optimize your health on every single level, I don't think there's anything more powerful than that.
Yeah, no, I would agree. And it's not that we're saying that this is a cure-all, but
No.
I've seen it, since 2002, 30% of people coming in with asthma and breathing-related issues.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense for anybody with a respiratory condition to have poor breathing, but more commonly they do.
Yeah.
I was a chronic mouth breather. If you have asthma, you don't just have inflammation of the lungs, you're more likely to have a stuffy nose. And because of a stuffy nose, you're more likely to breathe through your mouth. And if you breathe through your mouth, you're twice as likely to have a sleep problem.
Right.
So people with asthma and respiratory conditions are more likely to be tired. But then if we think of the anxiety population, 75% to 80% of the anxiety population have poor breathing patterns. It's not just that stress and anxiety is changing our breathing, but poor breathing patterns is feeding back into stress and anxiety. And I would love to see the day that when an individual goes to their psychotherapist for counseling, their psychotherapist is going to use cognitive behavioral training, which is excellent, but also change their breathing patterns from a biochemical, from a biomechanical and resonance frequency point of view, not just telling the individual, take a deep breath and you'll be fine, because that's entirely the wrong advice to do. Not just to change the respiratory rate, because that in turn can lead to an increase of minute ventilation, and it can go against what you really need.
Yeah.
Then sleep and recovery and resilience.
Yeah.
So we're talking about breathing, we're talking about the emotions, and we're talking about sleep. And regardless of the walk of life that people are in, we need to have quality sleep, quality breathing, and we need to have a calmness of the mind. They're all interlinked. If one is off, the other is off. If we wake up tired in the morning, we're not going to be in a great mood that day. No. If we're not in a great mood, it's going to impact our breathing. If our breathing is impacted, it affects our mood. And if our breathing impacted, it affects our sleep. It's really amazing, that bi-directional relationship. And even with, I suppose we touched on, traditions in breathing. And I was trained originally in the Buteyko method, which is was a wonderful method for me. It was absolutely changed my own life. And when you're trained in a tradition, it's very difficult to deviate outside of that tradition. Yeah. And that's where the oxygen advantage was born, because one aspect was I was giving functional breathing and mindfulness courses back in 2010, from 2010 to 2013 here in Ireland. and they were being attended face to face. And we had 3,000 people attend over those 3 years, but 90 to 95% of them were females. And I couldn't help wonder, where are the males? Because it were the males that were having the greatest risk of anxiety, certainly suicide. You know, I'm not totally sure about anxiety, but certainly males were, you know, they were in they were off. I wonder, like, what could they do? And maybe the male is kind of using sport, or some of them will go to drugs, some of them will go to drink. And, you know, that's often how a male can deal with it.
Right.
But the oxygen advantage, I was thinking about, how can we develop a breathing technique that is performance-based, and that it's pushing the boundaries, but it's also bringing in training of the mind, focus, concentration, sleep, recovery, as well as doing breath holding, that we can drop the blood oxygen saturation to the mid 80s to push, you know, because, like, as one said, you know, I remember I was working with a rugby team. I was going back a while and thinking, how will I get buy-in here, you know? And I said, I know I'm going to get buy-in. I'm going to push these guys that they will feel an intense feeling of breathlessness that they've never felt before.
Yeah.
And if I can push them to that feeling, then they know. But also, it's not just about that. It's about decongesting the nose, improving blood flow to the brain and everything.
Yeah.
So coming back to my point, you know, we need a certain freedom with breathing. We need not to be tied down to a particular tradition. We should be looking at what can we do in terms of the breath and human performance.
Yeah.
And traditionally, we have been in our own little silos. And that's where, you know, the oxygen advantage, I suppose, just gives you the freedom. It gives me the freedom to kind of open it up. And, you know, it's been great. It's been great.
I mean, I put that down to also why the Wim Hof method has skyrocketed so much with men as well, because it's about that, cold showers and diving in freezing cold lakes, and sort of, you know, there's that sort of competitive aspect about it, isn't there? And you know, like, how resilient can you be? And of course, you know, there's always someone that takes it a bit too far, but creating that new perception of breathing, that it's not just about lying on your yoga mat and pretending to be a cloud, that it's actually more about building resilience, and you can actually activate performance and elevate your life as a result. That's really got the male population actually really getting into it now, with, you know, YouTubers like Yes Theory doing sessions with Wim Hof, and Lewis Howes from the School of Greatness, all these huge influential people on social media, you know, meeting Wim Hof and actually experiencing breathing for themselves, Joe Rogan, you know, and it's an amazing thing. And I definitely feel the same with the oxygen advantage, that it really stimulates both men and women because of that increase in performance. Because we're almost adhering to those social norms we've been taught, I suppose, right? That you want to be the best, which is a very Western way of thinking, I suppose, that you want to perform well.
Yeah, you know, there's probably a feeling of satisfaction as well with it. I probably fall into that camp in terms of we do. I think there's an innate drive to achieve, or at least, you know, do the best that we can do. And, you know, it would be great if we could fall into an occupation or a career path that really suited our ability, because it just makes life a little bit easier as well. And also then we tend to excel in it. And I think the oxygen advantage traditionally, about 4 years ago, was very much male oriented. Now it's becoming very balanced. And, you know, we were talking before we come on here about the difference between breathing for females and breathing for males. And I was very slow to embrace this. And the reason that I embraced it was I was giving a talk. I was working with a musician here in Ireland from one of the bands. And he's talked to me about his fiance was going through PMS. And she read the oxygen advantage, and she started taping her mouth at night, and she started noticing that there were changes happening. And I'd came across this before, because you'll always see kind of a connection in different articles and different stuff that I would be reading. I came across it, but I kind of overlooked it just because, you know, ignored it a little bit. But then I started delving deeper into it and put a chapter together for this new book that'll be coming out. But
Yeah.
It's remarkably different. Breathing for females versus breathing for males. How on earth has this been overlooked?
Right. I mean, the same. I work a lot in the fitness industry, and it's exactly the same that you'll find all mainstream gym programs are designed by men. And actually, a lot of the workouts that are very well known and very often practiced are designed by men, and they're made for a male body, whereas actually the female body couldn't be more different. And which
Yes.
is why with the oxygen advantage, like we were talking about before, there is a difference with breathing as a female, especially in terms of the paper with, I don't think it was too long ago, actually, it was definitely in the 2000s, stating about during the luteal phase how your carbon dioxide
Yes.
levels can drop by up to 25%, especially if you're suffering from PMS.
Yes.
And that's going to alter your breathing massively. And if these women are trying to do workouts that are perhaps designed not great for their bodies anyway, it's just
Yes.
going to be one big struggle. And I think there's a big empowerment that it doesn't need to be like that. It can be a little more effortless.
Yeah, totally. This has been written about since 1915.
Wow.
Women's breathing was different to men's. But as you said, most research is done by men.
Yeah.
And also, research done on women doesn't take into account the stage of the monthly cycle.
Yeah.
So days 10 to days 22, and I haven't fully got my head around it too, but days 10 to days 22,
The luteal phase.
post-ovulation, luteal phase, and I think it's also going into the follicular phase as well, that you've got 12 days there that progesterone levels can be quite high.
Yeah.
And when there's an increase of progesterone, it's a respiratory stimulant. So the female is going to breathe harder and faster. This can cause, as you said, carbon dioxide to drop by as much as 25%.
Yeah.
That's a huge drop.
Yeah.
Now, it's even more than just affecting the female's ability to perform. It's affecting their everyday life.
Yeah.
They will be more prone to fatigue. They will be more prone to anxiety, depending on genetics, of course.
Of course.
And depending on their breathing patterns as well. Like, what is their everyday breathing anyway before they go into this phase?
Right. Because if you're breathing dysfunctionally, over breathing, sleeping with an open mouth, then you're really screwing yourself over, right?
Yeah. No, I think it's going to vary from female to female depending on a number of different factors.
Yeah.
But also pain perception. So hyperventilation can increase pain perception. It reduces pain thresholds.
Of course.
And there were a small number of studies in terms of PMS showing that breathing exercises can help reduce the symptoms of PMS. Right. You know, I think the BOLT score, which is a measure of breath hold time, comfortable breath hold time, and this is when the individual is sitting down for, say, 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Just take a normal breath in and out of their nose, pinch their nose, and time it in seconds until you feel the first definite desire to breathe. I think it's important for females to track their BOLT score against the monthly cycle.
I agree. And especially now with apps that are coming really into the media and into play, such as Natural Cycles, what I personally have switched to. I used to be on the contraceptive pill and I've now switched to Natural Cycles. But rather than just going on how you feel, by having a tangible measurement, such as I measure my temperature every morning, but I also take my BOLT score every morning, and having those two measurements, I know exactly where I'm at, and so I then know how to serve my body throughout the day, how hard I work out today, rather than going on something that's more outside of myself, maybe a social expectation from couch to 5K that I must run 5K today, otherwise I am not a fit human being and I will not look like those people on Instagram. And it's rather, you know, actually I'm really in a mid-luteal phase. My BOLT score's definitely dropped, you know, maybe it's usually 31, it's dropped to about a 25, 26. Maybe today I just do some yoga. And I take care of myself. And imagine if everyone had that awareness, though. It's such a more loving and gentle approach to fitness, but I think personally would maximize results.
Well, it's elite athletes are using it, not just females, but elite athletes track their heart rate variability. And if they are in a state of sympathetic activation, they won't train as hard that day. And it really, really does make sense. You know, I'd love to see it that we have a breathing program specifically for females. and for it to get out there and
Yeah.
to start gathering some evidence on this as well.
Absolutely.
Even though it's been written about, there's papers on it, but it has been overlooked. And,
Absolutely.
for every aspect,
Yeah.
for even young kids, and, you've got 16 or 17 or 18-year-old going to do their exams.
Yeah.
Performance, mental health is going to be affected. Their sleep is affected.
Yeah.
This should be taken into consideration, but often not. It's,
100%.
as I said, it's not.
100%. And I'll be really excited, actually, as you mentioned, that if there's a chapter in your next book all about women's health.
No, it's all about women's breathing.
I'll be really excited to read that, and a lot of other people too, so I'll be one of the first to grab a copy for sure. I know we're needing to round up soon, but I wanted to ask you that when you were first creating the Oxygen Advantage, did you ever expect it to go where it's gone now, to be in so many different countries and have so many people and elite athletes and business people starting to take this on and incorporate this? I mean, I really think in 20 years, this is going to be fully mainstream, 100%. And
it would be great to see today.
Yeah.
I have no expectations when it comes to bringing out anything. And the reason being is because I had so many
way to look at it.
I had so many disappointments in my earlier years. So you know what? In 2002, I started working with breathing, and I had no idea. I went into an industry which is not my background. My background is completely different. I retrained.
Yeah.
I went into breathing that was not looking from the yoga perspective, or any other aspects of it. And it has been very fortunate. It has been really, really, I've had many lucky breaks. I've had many helpful events happen. I put the books out there. I started writing the first book in 2003 because I just felt I didn't get any support from the medical profession. Doctors weren't aware of it, but not necessarily interested in it. Now, granted, we have medical doctors now on our boards.
Yeah.
We have medical doctors who are instructors, and that's been tremendous because doctors are starting to go outside of their normal training and look towards the breath. So it's all changing, and I'm delighted to see it happen. It's been great, but so it's like writing this new book, Georgie. This, you sit down to write a book. Could be 2-3 years before you put everything in. Right. And I suppose if I was writing it for the purpose of looking at the outcome, it would be daunting. So I don't actually.
That's a great way to
because I write it and I don't even know. How is it going to do? We haven't a clue.
No.
But it doesn't matter because then I'm focusing on the process. And here, I suppose, for age and life experience, I have a few more miles in the clock than you have, nearly double the miles in the clock. So it gives you a little bit more patience.
100%.
And you have the experience that like I brought out a book, I remember, in 2003, and it was doing nothing. Close your mouth. It was doing nothing in 2003. And something happened in 2004, 2005. And the book has been consistently the top 10 best-selling asthma books on Amazon.co.uk, and I think Amazon.com, if you were to go into Amazon now, put in Close Your Mouth and best-selling asthma books, that category, it's typically in the top 10. I'd never have expected that. So we never know how sometimes, and that's why people put business plans together, and it's like, how on earth do you know what way it goes? This is where intuition. This is where sometimes we have to rely on our hunch, because when you introduce something fresh and original, you don't have the basis of experience to draw upon when it's so different, and you have to go with your gut feeling.
Yeah.
And this ties in with the breath as well, because
100%.
When we're connected with the breath, we are more in tune with what's going on in the body. There's space between thoughts. The mind is calmer. And fresh and original thinking can originate, because there's no room for fresh and original thinking to originate when the mind is incessantly in a state of thought.
Yeah, that's a brilliant point as well. I mean, of course, legends like Deepak Chopra teaches to become unattached to outcome and, focus on the journey, not the destination.
Yes.
And so I think that is an incredible mantra actually for life, and rounding it back for anyone's journey that's listening to switch from mouth breathing to nasal breathing, because it is a journey, and it's a journey that can involve a little discomfort at first. Changing any sort of habit is never comfortable. Improving oneself, I don't think, is ever comfortable. So focusing on that journey, I think, couldn't be more important. And I think for anyone trying to achieve anything, that's an incredible
Yes.
way
Now,
to do it. So
the
no,
only
it's
thing
great.
going on its favor is that you can notice results pretty quickly through the
Yeah,
breath. You know,
100%.
it's like I've seen it with people if they were mouth breathing during sleep and they get their mouth closed at night and they start doing their physical exercise with their mouth closed, they
Straight
can see
away.
results sometimes in a couple of days that can
Yeah.
be quick enough depending on the person. And
I
I'd
did,
also,
for sure.
you did as
Yeah.
well. For people in yoga, like people often ask, how should I breathe during yoga? I remember sitting in Robin Rottenberg's yoga courses. And the one thing that you would always be aware of in our yoga is you would never hear any student breathing.
Right.
And
Silent breathing.
they were silent. Everybody was absolutely silent. They were doing full breaths.
Yeah.
They were doing breath holding, but they weren't hearing their breathing. We can take a full breath, a really slow breath, a low breath, nose breathing, silent breathing, light, slow, and deep. And the acronym is LSD, easier to remember. Light is about the biochemistry, slow is about resonance frequency, and deep is about just breathing low. But we don't have to take big breaths to have a deep breath. It's all about light breathing with deep breathing.
Yeah, and I think the term that comes to me a lot, especially when I am teaching now the oxygen advantage, I feel so privileged to be an instructor, is the word effortless ease. That when someone is breathing functionally, the person just looks effortless. They could be, you look at any marathon runner, right? And they could be running for the rest of the day, and it just looks like it's no trouble for them whatsoever. But you see so many people, especially around London, as they're and it doesn't look effortless at all. It looks very difficult, and I wouldn't want to go on a run like that.
Yeah, it's a good point. Initially, when you switch from mouth to nose breathing, the air hunger can be a little bit more. Yeah, it's normal, but it diminishes over time because the body adapts to that. And the other thing I'd say to people is get nasal dilator. You use a nasal dilator if they have a compromised nose.
Yeah.
But switching from mouth to nose breathing during physical exercise is a great thing. Now, the nose can run a little bit at the start, and that's normal. Bring it tissue or whatever with you. But it's the recovery is much better. Oxygen uptake is better. Oxygen delivery is better. You're aerobically for longer. Not no trauma, but less trauma on the airways. Yeah. Especially for somebody who is doing, if you say mouth breathing and hard breathing and upper chest breathing, it's a lot of trauma in terms of causing colds and chest infections and exercise-induced bronchoconstriction. Yeah. So it's all there.
Absolutely. Patrick, I know we're running out of time, so I just want to say how much of a pleasure it's been to talk to you, and just how even from listening to you or reading your books, how much I learn, and I've learned a lot during this conversation as well. So thank you so much. It's such a pleasure.
Yes, my pleasure. You're very welcome, and thanks for contributing to it. It was a great conversation, by the way. I have to say, for a 25-year-old, your head is well screwed on, if you don't mind me saying.
Thank you, Patrick.